التغيير ليس مستغربا.
اللي عم بصير 7 أياد بشكل آخر.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on FutureTV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's headlines. Lebanese forces leader Samir Jaja says he is seeking to implement a strong republic in Lebanon. The cabinet appoints 5 new governors for regions in Lebanon during a cabinet session headed by President Michel Sleiman. And Ukraine's security services say the country is fighting a war against separatists in the east of the country. Lebanese forces leader Samir Jaja says he is seeking a strong republic for Lebanon, the motto for his presidential campaign. During a Lebanese forces event earlier today, Jaja reiterated his accusations against the March 8 coalition, which he says is seeking to disrupt and boycott the presidential elections to keep the state disabled. He added the Lebanese should not surrender to this group's recurring attempts and should confront March 8 until it accepts to attend the election sessions to choose a new president. Lebanon's parliament failed to elect a president for the second time on Wednesday as a legislator failed to reach a quorum amid a boycott by March 8's loyalty to the resistance and change and reform blocs. The cabinet has appointed 5 new governors and accepted the resignation of Governor of Beirut and the North, Nassif Kalouch. The ministerial session, which was held at Babda Palace and chaired by President Michel Sleiman, appointed Fouad Fleifel as governor of Mount Lebanon, Ziad Shbib as governor of Beirut, Imad Labaki of the northern Akkar region, Ramzi Nohra of the north, and Bashir Khudr as governor of Baalbek Hermel in the Bekaa. Industry Minister Hussein Haj Hassan congratulated the residents of Baalbek Hermel and of Akkar on the appointments of 2 new governors in these regions after years of vacuums in these posts, he says. At the beginning of the ministers' meeting, Sleiman stressed the importance of the anticipated presidential vote and voiced hope that choosing the next head of state will take place in the upcoming parliamentary session on Wednesday. Ministers also discussed funding a new bridge in the El Mitten neighborhood of Jaladib. $58 million were dedicated to improve the roads in Jaladib after residents took to the streets and threatened to block the highway if the ministers did not adopt a decision to fund a tunnel in the region. President Michel Sleiman has requested that General Prosecutor Judge Samir Hammoud explains to the Special Tribunal for Lebanon the country's commitment to freedom of the media. Sleiman made his request following talks with the General Prosecutor on the STL summons of Al Jadid Television and Al Akhbar newspaper journalists on charges of contempt and obstruction of justice. Sleiman also asked Hammoud to inquire about the extent to which Lebanese laws fall in line with the summons. The STL announced that it has summoned Karma Mohammed Tahsin Khayyat from Al Jadid Television and Brahim Hamad Al Amin from Al Akhbar to appear before it on 2 accounts of contempt and obstruction of justice. The STL's spokesperson, Martin Youssef, said via Twitter on Wednesday that the journalist's trial will take place before an independent judge. Information Minister Ramzi Jrej says investigations with Al Jadid and Al Akhbar will prove their innocence. Future bloc leader Fouad Sanyura has met with representative of Secretary General of the United Nations in Lebanon, Derek Plummy, at his office in Beirut. The officials tackled the situation in Lebanon and the region. Several residents of Baalbek, East Lebanon, have blocked a vital road in the area in protest of the Army's security measures, including recent arrests. Using burning tires, residents of the Sharauni neighborhood, where the Army conducted several raids a day earlier, blocked the road leading to downtown Baalbek, crippling traffic in the city. Gunmen also fired shots into the air. The Army, which has launched a security plan to restore law and order in the country, deployed additional military units to Sharauni and reopened the street. A Sidon fisherman, now dubbed the Shark Hunter, has caught 12 sharks over the past 2 weeks at a secret spot off the coast just south of Beirut. Mahmoud Wahbi says the first time he caught one was on his fishing boat with his 3 children when the boat suddenly started shaking. Since then, Wahbi sought to sail to the same location near the Rumaili coast to test his luck in the waters. Several sharks weighed an estimated 250 kilograms each, and the others were just a little above 100 kilos. Gloating over his catch, Wahbi refrained from specifying the exact location and preferred to keep it a secret. Clearly relishing his new fame, He says that these types of sharks travel in packs. At the fish market in Sidon, Wehbi's stand was the most crowded, with people buying 1 kilogram of the white meat for 5,000 Lebanese pounds to prepare fish kibbeh, a popular local dish. He says he will sell the rest to local restaurants. The first Syrian rebels are due to withdraw from areas in Homs after agreeing a ceasefire deal with government forces who had surrounded them. Activists inside Syria's third largest city say the first of about 1,000 fighters were to withdraw from the old city at noon local time to the countryside north of the city. The withdrawal is expected to be supervised by UN delegation and the Government Reconciliation Committee. Syrian Red Crescent ambulances will also evacuate the injured from the old city area under the terms of the 48-hour deal, and rebels will release an Iranian officer they are holding prisoner. While today's deal will leave the city in effective control of government forces, there are reports of fighters living among the population in the densely populated Al-Wa'ir neighborhood. And coming up next, thousands of people are killed in a catastrophic landslide in Afghanistan. That and more after the break. Welcome back. Vote counting is continuing across Iraq following the country's first parliamentary election since the withdrawal of U.S. troops in 2011. In Basra, a UN delegation observed elections workers counting and sorting ballots from Wednesday's polls. The head of the city's main counting center, Kanan Al-Lami, says ballot boxes had been received from smaller counting centers and results were now being verified. Counting is also taking place in the capital, Baghdad. The polls mark Iraq's first democratic national vote in the absence of foreign troops, despite levels of violence unseen since the darkest days of its 2005-2008 civil war and revived al-Qaeda-inspired Sunni insurgency. Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, a member of the Shiites majority, later praised high reported turnout figures as a victory over insurgents who had vowed to kill anyone who voted. Counting may take 3 weeks, but the commission hopes to declare final results by the end of May. A suicide car bomber has attacked a security intelligence post in southeastern Yemen, injuring 2 military guards. This is according to an official who blames al-Qaeda. In today's attack, the car exploded at the entrance of the post in a residential neighborhood of Malkalla, the provincial capital of Hadramaut, causing damage to it and other buildings. Guards reportedly opened fire on the car driven by an al-Qaeda suicide bomber as it approached the entrance. The Yemen-based al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is regarded by the United States as the network's most dangerous franchise and has been subjected to an intensifying drone war this year. Yemen's army launched an offensive earlier on Tuesday against hideouts of the al-Qaeda affiliate, mainly in the south, where the fighters are strongly rooted. Moving on to Africa, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says South Sudan's President Salva Kiir and rebel commander Riek Machar are both committed to holding direct talks to resolve the 4-month conflict that has killed thousands. Kerry, currently on a tour of several African countries, pressed the warring leaders to set a date for face-to-face talks, urging the UN Security Council to consider sanctions to stop attacks on civilians. The meeting, which will be the first face-to-face talks since the conflict erupted in December, is to be held in Ethiopia, where both sides have previously held talks without success. This comes after UN envoy on prevention of genocide, Adama Dieng, told the Security Council that violence in South Sudan could spiral out of control into genocide.
The violence that broke out on 15 December following a power struggle within the ruling Sudan People's Liberation Movement, SPLM, between former Vice President Riek Machar and President Salva Kiir has quickly degenerated into ethnic violence. The recent brutal attacks in Bentiu, Unity State, and Bor, Jonglei State seem to have changed the trajectory of the conflict, and if such attacks are not immediately halted, could plunge the country into serious violence that could spiral out of control. In the current situation, we see elements that we could categorized as risk factors of genocide and other atrocity crimes.
Ukraine's security services say the country is fighting a war against separatists in the east of the country and blame agents in the breakaway Moldovan region for provoking deadly rioting in the southern town of Odessa, which claimed the lives of more than 40 people. More in this report.
Armed men roamed the streets of the town, where separatists had built barricades and blocked off roads with sandbags and tires. The same morning, the mayor of the town says the 7 captured European military observers had been released. The release comes a day after pro-Russian forces shot down 2 Ukrainian military helicopters. Its goal was set to free the hostages. Just yesterday, the Ukrainian armed forces moved in on the anti-government militia stronghold of Slavyansk, marking the heaviest military response by Kiev since last week. Russian President Vladimir Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said that Russia has lost control over self-defense forces in eastern Ukraine. Yesterday, the United Nations Security Council held its 13th emergency meeting on the growing crisis in Ukraine at the request of Russia, its second request in a week. Vitaly Churkin, Russian ambassador to the UN, called in the signatories of the Geneva Declaration, the US and the EU, not to commit a fatal error and to take a look at all the possible consequences of their actions. The Western powers on the Council accused Russia of equipping and funding the pro-Russia forces that have seized government buildings in 10 eastern cities.
The Russian Federation has described events this morning in eastern Ukraine as a punitive military operation against peaceful activists. This is yet again a gross distortion of the facts. The Ukrainian government has the right and indeed the responsibility to uphold the rule of law and protect its citizens in its own territory. Of course, in doing so, it should at all times do so in a proportionate and measured way. The actions undertaken this morning by Ukrainian security forces in and around Slavyansk appear to have been just that, in an effort to relieve the city from armed groups sponsored and controlled by Russia that have been terrorizing the local population. We urge them to continue to take every effort to ensure that the risks to civilians are minimized.
The UN will send its political chief, Jeffrey Feltman, to Kiev and Moscow next week to urge restraint and an immediate return to dialogue. In Washington, President Barack Obama and German Chancellor Angela Merkel threaten tougher new sanctions against Russia if Moscow doesn't quickly change its disruptive behavior.
Afghan provincial officials say thousands of people have been killed in a catastrophic landslide that buried a village in the Hindu Kush under tons of rubble. Sources say 2,100 people from 300 families were killed when a hill collapsed on the village of Hobo Barik in Badakhshan province during heavy rain. UN authorities in Afghanistan could not verify the Afghan officials' death toll, saying 350 were confirmed dead and many more were missing. The UN says its focus is now on more than 4,000 people displaced by the disaster.
The United Nations is working with its partners on the ground, including the Afghan Red Crescent and other NGOs, to help mobilise the resources to make sure that those people who need things like food and water and medical support are receiving those. And again, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is in the lead here in terms of helping coordinate and organise all these different parts of the UN system on the ground to make sure that people who need the most support get that support in a timely fashion.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Lebanese forces leader Samir Jaja says he is seeking to implement a strong republic in Lebanon. The cabinet appoints 5 new governors for regions in Lebanon during a cabinet session headed by President Michel Sleiman. And finally, Ukraine's security services say the country is fighting a war against separatists in the east of the country. Those are your Saturday headlines from us here at Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, wishing you all a very nice weekend.
الغياب ليس مستغربا. لا عم بصير 7 أياد بشكل آخر.